Welcome to the Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver podcast. We're happy you're here. On the podcast, we're certain that you'll relate to the caregiver stories and find comfort with your honorary sisters. Now, before we start, I want to remind you to go to our website, confessionsofareluctantcaregiver.com, and sign up for our newsletter. It's full of useful information that you can immediately use. Now, let's learn more about today's guest. Hey, Jay.
Hey, Natalie.
How are you doing today?
I'm bright-eyed and bushy-tailed.
I know the same, right?
Yeah.
So, we have a really awesome guest, and her name's Erin.
It's true. Yeah. I mean, it's nice for you to say that, when she's here already, you're like, oh, she's awesome.
She's awesome. It's like if we didn't have Erin on the show, we were like, we'll let her in a second. Let's talk about her first. And we're like, no, let's just talk about her to her face. This will be fun.
Hey, it could have been worse. I would have been really awkward if you didn't say that.
I know, right? We've got Erin here today, and everybody's all like crickets.
And she's awful.
Yeah, she sucks. And so but let's do a podcast with her anyway. So, is it Erin? Is it Galyean? Galyean.
Natalie,
Like
you totally
stallion.
butchered that. Yeah, you butchered that now.
I don't know. I'm from Tennessee. I said it the way it's spelled. Galyean.
You and everybody else.
Sorry,
Galyean.
Erin.
Oh, I like that. I
Yeah,
didn't
sorry,
know. Well, there wasn't like
that's
dots
okay.
and things. Anyway, now we're just goofing off.
Okay.
Jay, I am
Focus.
so excited to have Erin here with us today.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
she has quite the story, and I am so excited for people to get to hear about her caregiver journey. And she has like the most unique name. So I'm going to let you tell folks about Erin because she's just really cool.
She is cool. I'm going to throw it out there. I get to say it first. Erin is a badass.
Yes, she is.
I'm the
And
one
she
that
happens
doesn't.
to also be an advocate.
Yeah, so she is. So Erin also, she's an author and she's a professional speaker, but she does, like you said, Nat, Erin, you have a caregiving story, and I know that all of us are going to be able to learn from it. In 2017, Erin's sister, Megan, was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and she was healthy, no issues. She actually was healthy and bragged about it. Her diagnosis was devastating and scary to the entire family. And one of the reasons for that, though, was that Erin's dad, he had been diagnosed. They had gone through that experience just 10 years prior, and they had lost him. Megan, her diagnosis, she was curable, but complications from that, Megan lost her fight with those diseases 13 months later. But Erin took that. And like I said, she's badass. And she published, we say that because Erin, your books and just your whole mission, your book is titled Badass Advocates.
JJ just wants to cuss Erin.
I just want to say it because
I know she keeps saying it.
I never swear. I never swear. So this is the reason.
Yeah.
I can put it in quotes. I'm not going to say it again.
Don't keep saying
Becoming the champion your loved ones deserve. And you share that story. And more importantly, you teach family caregivers how to lead that charge. And you do that. You've got 20 years in pharma, and you share that story. You've got that, but you share it with all that personal experience. I'm going to say it's empowering. I'm like, yes, it's Erin. So, okay, now I'm done.
Erin, I think we're totally off task this morning. So people are going to be like, this is not what JJ and Natalie normally sound like. They've lost their mind, and we're not editing. You're welcome for that, folks.
Yeah. But I'm so excited, Erin. And I know when we talked to you the first time, so you've got the sister story, but it really starts, with your dad and that passion, the love for your dad, kind of, he's a glue. But tell us kind of how this road started for you.
Yeah, so I will start with my dad's story. And I love that you guys are a little goofy this morning while I'm on here, because I love that. That's fun. This is making it even better. So when I was 20 years old, I had just transferred to the University of North Carolina, and I was there for probably a month, not even, and I got a phone call from my parents telling me that my father was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, as you said. And My father was just the light of the family. He was so much fun. He was loving. He was not the disciplinarian in the family. But if he got mad at you, you really messed up. Like it was definitely on you and you knew that.
Yeah.
But he was just the guy at the party that made it fun, that everyone wanted to be his best friend. And, he was just a wonderful father and we were blessed. And 10 months later, my father passed away at the age of 53. I was away at school for most of that, so I was not his caregiver. I also, being young, was naive and, wanted to be out partying, hanging out with my boyfriend, doing all those things that 20-year-olds want to do. I didn't want to be caring for my father. Yeah. And I think there's a bit of denial there too. Mm-hmm. After my father passed away, I felt a ton of guilt, which is part of this journey. It's very important that I mention that because it's what kind of led me to what I do and how I handled my sister becoming ill. Yeah. So the guilt was tough. I felt like I didn't do what I was supposed to do. And, I wasn't as supportive as I should have been. And I just finished reading the book, The Power of Regret by Daniel Pink. And he talks about that regret, which I had many with my father, is not a bad thing because you can learn from it and do better the next time in some cases. And I wish my sister didn't get sick just so I could, work through my regret. But that is what ended up happening 20 years later. So my sister, Megan, and I were best friends growing up. She was the coolest older sister. She was 6 years older. When she was a teenager, she would even let me come into her room and hang out with her when she was like 16, 17. And I was 10. Who wants a 10-year-old hanging out with them when they're 16, 17? No sister does that, right?
That's right. Not us. No.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but she was super laid back and almost like a second mom to me because she was older and just the way she took care of me. And then as we grew up together and became in our 20s and 30s, we just got closer and closer. And we were just each other's, buds and talked to each other on the phone every single day. So when my sister was diagnosed, I was devastated. And it was one of my biggest fears coming true. So she was diagnosed first with a autoimmune disease. Mm-hmm. So that's how it showed up in April 2017. She got these sores in her mouth. It was awful. She lost some weight. But they said, the good news is you don't have cancer. I remember her distinctively calling me and telling me that. And I was like, whew, thank God she doesn't have cancer. And then 6 months later, she was having trouble breathing. She woke up in the middle of the night, was really struggling. And she went to the emergency room and they diagnosed her with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Now, I don't know what happened before, how that got missed, but it was. Maybe her blood work came back okay. And so they diagnosed her with the same cancer my father had. Now, they said she had a different strand. So my father's cancer, his version was obviously not good because he died, 10 months later after his diagnosis, where my sister's was supposed to be the good kind. I'm making air quotes because there's no good cancer. But if you're going to have one, it is curable, exactly right. and you can go through chemo. So the bad news was they kept her overnight because her difficulty breathing is not a side effect or a symptom of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. That's not typical. And they found that she also had a very rare lung disease called bronchiolitis obliterans, which is a mouthful. It's also known as popcorn lung, which you may have heard of in the media with vaping and e-cigarettes. And now she was not a smoker, but what happened is this is what they found out. She probably had the cancer for about a year, but didn't know it. And this can happen with women especially. This is what I've learned from doctors because women will blame it on other things. They will blame diseases on other things. Like, I'm just tired from being a mom and running the kids around or whatever it is. Well, she was sick for probably about a year, didn't know it. She felt fine. And then that cancer caused an autoimmune disease. And that's what showed up first, the symptoms. And then that autoimmune disease caused this lung disease. So her body was just attacking itself. This was really not good news because, one, you don't want any disease that's rare because that means a lot of people don't know how to treat it. Mm-hmm. And when it's aggressive, it means it's just going to be fierce and take over your body. And that's exactly what happened. When she was going through chemo treatments, soon after that, the doctors could not address the lung disease. So that meant that it continued to progress over the winter of 2017, 2018. And when she was finished chemotherapy treatments, the lung disease just had gone so far that she was even wearing an oxygen machine almost the entire day. definitely throughout the night and then throughout the day. When she started, she wasn't on an oxygen machine at all, 6 months prior when she was first diagnosed. So it progressed very quickly. And she was a tiny woman. And so it just took over her little body. And over a 13-month period, Megan continued to lose weight and her breathing got worse. And she ended up passing away of October of 2018, just 3 days shy of her 48th birthday. So young.
Yeah, no, she's very young. And it's crazy because, she was healthy. I know that you had said, and when you shared with us in the past that she was very healthy. So let me go a little bit of a different angle. Let's talk about you.
Yeah.
And so I want to go back to your dad for a second. And okay, so where were your mom and dad living at the time?
They were living outside of Philadelphia. Okay,
so you came to the South, we get it, to go to school. We respect that. We're Southerners. And so we get it. Like
it's beautiful, great weather.
It's real nice down here. And, I'll say this. Do you think that, especially when you're 20, you're young, you're right. You're wanting to have a good time and you want to just ignore. When our dad passed, it was for years, it never felt like he was gone because of the fact that when I left for college, I always stayed away from home. I didn't move back to Tennessee. I stayed in Virginia. So I didn't go home that often. So if you don't go home often or you're not used to that routine, it's like, oh, I'm just going to pretend in my head that he's not gone. Like, oh, we just haven't talked in a while. Yeah. And so do you think that was part of and what did your mom, how did that kind of work? Because technically you would say, would you have considered yourself like a long distance caregiver at that point related to
I don't. Reflecting back, I wish I could say that, but I really don't. Because first of all, when my dad got sick, we didn't have cell phones. This is 1997.
Yeah. Okay, good point.
So different era, right? So it's not like we could text and call all the time. You just didn't do that back then. Yeah. And so I don't think, for me, yes, I'm with you. I was in denial when I was in school. When I came home, it was a rude awakening because my father had he always he had this plump belly, he was a great hugger. He's like an Irish leprechaun. That's how we describe my dad, right? Great sense of humor, loved to do the Irish jig, even though he didn't really technically know how to do it. Just a fun time. And so when I came home, he went from this man who gave the best hugs to being frail.
Yeah.
And thin. And I never knew my dad as frail and thin in my whole life. Yeah. So that was a rude awakening, walking in the door and seeing that. And then he died in the summer. So I was there for it. And thankfully, I'm grateful for that I was there. And so I don't feel like I really played a caregiving part. I felt like I was there as a teenager, really. I was 20, but you're not far from being a teenager.
That's the moment you feel like a child, if you think about it. All the adults are around me and they're making all the decisions. And I'm just going to stand back here on the peripheral and you just tell me what to do. Go buy milk. Done.
Yes.
Go run to the store. Done.
You're exactly right. That's how I felt.
Yeah, I kind of see that when you say when you got there, you saw how much it had progressed. And I know we just went through that with Mom, where I hadn't seen her in 3 months. And it sounds like that progression that your dad's disease had, it was in that short amount of time when you saw that fun leprechaun and he had gotten that thin. We saw that progression in a short amount of time too. And that is a big reality. And that's kind of a new recognition of, oh my gosh, this is my new reality. And that was that's a slap in the face. I don't, that's
it's
whoa.
Jarring.
Well, if it makes you feel better, Erin, when we came home in February to do our respite, which I sucked at. I always joke that I'm I sucked at it because I let JJ take the lead. And you know what? It's so funny how we fell into our traditional roles because JJ would be go get Mom this or go get Mom that or go do this, Natalie. And I'm all no problem, Jay. You just tell me what to do because it's uncomfortable. But to see our mom having had declined, I talked about it in an episode that we recorded about what happened with the nursing home situation. I wanted to leave because it felt uncomfortable. It didn't feel familiar. And that discomfort, I wanted to get away from.
Yeah.
And if I'm really honest about it, it didn't feel comfortable. And again, it's not about our mom. It's not about, like your dad. It's about our comfort level, I think. Like, this doesn't feel good. So I'd like to just ignore it, or I want to stay away so I don't have to acknowledge it. And so,
it's interesting though, you went back to a comfort role. And now that you're saying that, I'm sure I did too, because I'm the baby sister. And so my sister was there with my mom. So she was caregiving for my dad. And, she was only 26 at the time. So still young, but more mature than I was. And, so I'm sure I went right back into that, slipped right back into that role. And that does give you comfort to be whatever role you play in that family, to take that role. When my sister got sick, my role completely changed because of my experience with my dad. Obviously I was older.
What did you take from that?
Wait, where does your sister live first? Because I want to know how far you all lived apart from each other. Distance always matters in my mind.
So I'll tell you, when my sister left for college, I cried because I thought we would never live in the same city, and we did only briefly. And I do have a brother too, who's also wonderful. My sister and I were just really close growing up.
Like, he's fine.
My poor brother. He never gets mentioned. I only talk about my sister. But so she moved around the country, and when she was sick, she was in Charleston, South Carolina, and I was in Dallas, Texas. So almost a repeat of what was happening with my father, because I'm several states away. It is a flight. It is, well, I guess I could have driven home from North Carolina, but still a long drive. So it's not easy. You're playing a part from far away. Now, like I said, with my dad, I didn't. With my sister, I was like determined. I am not going to not be involved. I'm going to be as involved as I can. I'm going to figure out how. I'm going to fly back and forth. I also had a 2-year-old at the time, so that makes it a little bit more challenging. But my husband was wonderful and was always like, go get on a plane and go do what you need to do, because he knew how close we were. So different mindset.
Well, so and life experience. Oh, sorry, Jay, go ahead.
No. So what did you do? What did you take here? You say your different mindset, but you were there, you flew back and forth. So what did you do differently? Because you said you had guilt. What did you do that kept you from, because I think when we talked, you said you didn't have that with this situation. You grew from it. What did you take with you? Like how did you work with your sister?
I talk a lot about mindset because I think to be a badass advocate, it's all about mindset. It is saying, I'm going to do this and I'm not going to give up. It's not about, I knew I couldn't cure my sister, but what I was going to do is I was going to advocate for her and not worry about my ego or being uncomfortable or stepping out of my comfort zone. Who cares? I'm like, I'm here to fight for her. Right. So but with my dad, I didn't even think of any of those things. I didn't know. And plus, as Natalie said, or maybe Jay, you said it, I've been in the pharmaceutical industry for over 20 years. Yeah. So also my professional experience came in to play, where I'm used to speaking to physicians. So I wasn't always out of my comfort zone. But for those who are, don't worry about all that. Just do what you need to do. That's what I say. Just have that mindset that you need to do what you need to do. And so with my sister, I just started to think about, what could I do? So when I went to visit her, I made sure I was asking questions. I was taking notes. I started to record conversations with doctors with their permission. Of course, this is in my book too. I talk about that was one of the key things that we came up with. Record those conversations so you can go back and listen, because you forget. Or if you're not there and it's just my sister, my mom, I want to hear those conversations because I wasn't a part of those conversations all the time. So really figuring out strategies of how we could work together to advocate for her and really be involved as much as possible. And then also having that positive mindset when I was around her. I felt like, I don't know if you've ever been like hurt or anything like that, or sick, and you see someone's face and they look so scared. It scares you half to death, because you're like, if they're scared and they're looking at me like this, how bad is this? Yeah. So, I didn't want that for her, even though she knows that she's sick. I wanted us to come in and not be fake about it, but at least be a breath of fresh air. Yeah. So even though I had anxiety through the roof, I didn't want her to worry about that, because she would always worry about her little sister. And I didn't want her to even think about me. Worry about yourself.
So when you got done with those moments, because we have an aunt right now that's going through that, supporting her twin, and I talk to her pretty frequently, and my other aunt has cancer. And so my Aunt Jane, she says that I go in and I'm strong and I talk to those doctors and they give us bad news, but I'm like, it's going to be okay. But when she and I talk, she says, I get home and that's when what happened? Like, where were you? Yeah. Where were you?
Yeah. So I do the same thing. I did. I mean, I've cried on an airplane. I've come home and cry. And, like I said, my anxiety was through the roof. One thing that I talk a lot about and I'm open about is therapy. So just going back to my father's story, and Natalie, you're asking about what happened afterwards. My father, once he passed away, I went back to school about a month later, and I didn't want to go back to school. I wanted to be home. I was having a hard time. But my mom was like, your father wouldn't want you to quit school. So I stayed in school, and my roommate, who is a wonderful person, she basically said to me, you're not you. And I think you need to go speak to someone. So for anyone who's supporting someone like you are, this was the best thing anyone's ever done for me. She said, I'm going to call the counselor and I'm going to set up a therapy appointment for you. You don't need to do anything. All you need to do is just show up. Would you go? And I said, okay, I'll go. I had never seen a therapist. My family never talked about seeing a therapist. It was the best gift that you could give as a friend or a relative or someone that loves you, because she helped me. The guilt that I had felt, I don't feel that anymore because of that therapist. She helped me work through that stage. And so when my sister was sick, I was seeing a therapist and talking through the anxiety that I had. And so I didn't need to rely on my sister, who was always my confidant, right? To tell her, oh, I have anxiety about you being sick, right? Yeah. That's the last person you need to put that weight on. Yeah. So I highly recommend that if you're going through anything, when you're the caregiver or even just a family member, if you're not the main caregiver, go talk to somebody. It's a lot. And your friends are great to talk to, but they're also not certified therapists in grief. Like, go see a grief counselor if they're terminal, even if they're still alive. That's what I say, because they already they know how to deal with that as well. And you're kind of grieving while they're here.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that I've talked to people about, and for myself about counseling, and I totally believe in it, is that grief can come prior to death. Yeah. And that's something people have to recognize. And I don't think people talk about that at all, Erin. So I'm glad you brought that up. Is that in counseling, we're like, absolutely.
Yeah, we're big proponents of it. But I would also say you will experience grief even if the person does not pass.
Absolutely.
You will absolutely experience grief. I experience grief, honestly, intermittently. And so I experienced grief last year when we came back from after Jason finished treatment. And then a couple of weeks ago, felt like I had gone through this, experiencing grief and talking with my husband about it, just because of seeing our mom and the finality of where she's going to be. Because we don't think, like, I'm in my house right now, for example, and I don't think this is the last place I'm going to live. Like, nobody looks at their house as the last place they're going to live, which every day could be the last day you live. We don't know. Right. And so, but I had really experienced a lot of grief, and I know JJ experienced grief related to that. And so people need to understand that grief and can come in waves, and it hits you in different things, and it comes with smells and places that you go, or memories will come up because, your brain's pulling like, ooh, this looks familiar. This was related to a good time that you had. And you feel this overwhelm of like, oh, I remember that. And so it's really, how are you going to deal with that? And do you absorb that and you take it as a positive thing and you're able to sit back and smile, or is it going to derail you? And that's where I think it's so important to have skills to do that.
Agreed. And, you're grieving the life you used to have with that person.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So for my sister, going from this, we talked about her being healthy, but we didn't dive into it. She was a former Division I athlete. She really was a pillar in bringing lacrosse to the South. I know multiple people did, but lacrosse was her sport. And so she was one of the pioneers, and she influenced hundreds of young women and girls. I mean, her funeral, there were so many athletes that showed up to honor my sister.
Yeah.
There's things she did I didn't even know because she never bragged about it,
Yeah.
So she was just influential in that way. And so what a loss of being this amazing coach, athlete, and fun-loving friend too, to not being able to walk to the bathroom without an oxygen machine or some help.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I was grieving who was my best friend that now, and I was so sad for her, just seeing her pain. They would talk about her lung disease was like, the doctor, I'll never forget, said, imagine that you're you're breathing out of a straw. She said, but not a regular straw, a coffee straw.
Right.
That's what it's like for your sister to breathe. And so what a change of life. And that's just one example of a disease and what that can do for your mom and for others that are listening. It's different things, maybe they can't walk anymore, or, maybe they're depressed. And so seeing those things, seeing those changes, you do grieve the person that you knew and loved, and maybe they'll come back, but you never know. Every situation's different. When it comes to grief, I think the best thing I can say, and whether that person's alive or not, is gratitude. And I know we all hear about this, but it has been life-changing for me. It was something I never did. And I write it every day in my planner. So I write, what I'm going to do for the day. And then it's just perfect. So I'm taking notes anyway. And I write what I'm thankful for. And it doesn't have to be anything profound. It takes me all of 3 seconds to write it down. It could be anything. It could be, my cute little dog laying there that I'm thankful that she's just laying there and she makes me happy, and so I think if you can find something positive when you're going through something so awful and sad and difficult, that you can see that life isn't all bad, even at the worst of times. And that really changed for me. That was a game changer. I feel like something so simple.
And it is, because it's journaling is also something that's really good to be able to put your thoughts down. And I think a lot of people will be like, oh, that seems kind of silly, or that seems whatever. Right. Okay. Write down. I'm grateful for air. Well, you should be grateful for air, because some people don't have good air quality. And so, but I mean, I think it's really thinking about it. And I think even you might catch yourself in the middle of the day thinking, man, I am so happy that it's sunny today and I can go and feel the warmth on my face. That's that energizes you. So let me ask you this. I mean, you wrote Badass Advocate, you decided, so you're in pharmaceutical sales, and so did you do this? Cause I don't know the answer. Did you start the advocate side of your life before your sister got sick, during, or after?
Good question. So I started it when my sister was sick, not writing the book, but just advocating for her and navigating. Because remember, I didn't do it with my dad. So this was still first for me. Yes, I learned things and what I didn't do, but then there's a lot, because I wasn't doing anything. I had to figure things out. And so I would, along with my family, and I'm very close with my family, we would figure things out together. I also would notice that, maybe my mom and my sister would go to the doctor, and then my mom, we always tease my mom, she's not a nosy person, so she's the worst at asking questions. We're always like, did you ask this? And she's like, I didn't think of that, And I use her as an example because some of us are not good at asking questions. I never was until I got into sales, and I learned the skill. It is a skill. But then, I'm married to a man who is the best question asker. It gets on my nerves. He asks so many questions. So, you can have someone who's great at it, and you can have someone who's just not good at that. So figuring out what skills you need and pulling people in to do those things, to advocate, is so important. So I would then say, okay, Mom, here's some questions to ask. So that's when we started working together using text message to say, when you go in and see the pulmonologist today with Megan, can you ask these 5 questions? So it kind of evolved over time. And then when I wrote the book, I was like, people should intentionally do that. Yeah. Come together as a support team, because we eventually got there, but it took us a little time to get there. Come together. Everyone has different personalities, different thought processes. Have your text message chain with your family or whoever's part of that core support team, and come up with a list of questions. And then if you're the person that's going, like if I was the person go with my sister, I go through all those questions the day of or the day before. Let's say there's 20 questions that came in from our support team. go through them, and then make sure there's no repeats. Are there any follow-ups now that you're reading through them and going, oh, okay, that's a good question. But if he says this or she says this, what's the follow-up question to that? You are so prepared going in there. And then I say rank them. What are the most important questions you need answered? So if you get limited time, which we know this happens, sometimes physicians will get cut off because maybe there's an emergency or the nurse comes in and interrupts, or maybe your patient, your loved one sees a doctor who is very quick. They don't sit down for 30 minutes. We all have those too. Rank them from most important to least important. I need at least these 3 to 5 questions to be answered today. These last 5 would be awesome, but if we don't get there, I'm not going to be upset. At least I got these top ones answered. And then when you go in, tell the doctor, I have 10 questions I need answered today, so I would like to get through these. If you can give this is a sales technique, by the way, if you can give that doctor the warning, for lack of a better word, like I have 10 questions coming at you, then he or she knows in the back of their mind, okay, I got it. I know that there's a limited amount of time. If you just start rattling off questions, sometimes, and we've all been there, sometimes you get a little panicky. How long is this going on? I've got to go. I have another patient I need to see. Yeah. But if you give them 10 or whatever it is, they know, okay, all right, we're coming to 9. We're coming to 10. Okay, I know that we're coming to an end here. It's not going to last all day.
Right.
No, so, I totally agree. I think that's important.
You mentioned a couple of times there, Erin, that you had a support team. And I'm just curious because everybody needs that. And we do the text stream and things like that. Tell me kind of a little bit about your support team, because I feel like that's important. If you touch that, if you touch on that on your book, I will not say the word.
Badass advocate. It's all right. I have a dirty mouth, so that's okay. I don't mind saying.
Well, Natalie limits me on the way I can say it.
I love that. It's hilarious. So bossy, Natalie. So my sister's support team was my immediate family, which is my brother, my mom, her husband, and then her best friend, her college roommate, who also is a cancer survivor, and then my cousin. That was really it. And then there was a few friends too, who like she had a really good friend in a bunch of friends where she lived, but one of them was like probably more regularly involved. So here's what my advice is for a support team. If you have a big family, like all of you have a family that's really involved. We're blessed. We know that. It also can be too many people sometimes, right? Too many hands in the pot. That causes fights. And you can't have 20 people part of the support team. It's just too many. Right. So maybe there's a core support team that's like 5, maybe 10. A 10's even a big one, but that can regularly come in and support, go to doctor's offices, know how the medication works. It probably depends on the complexity of the disease as well as to how many people you need involved on a regular basis. Are they independent? My sister was not independent at this point, so she needed more support. So take all of that into consideration, as well as everyone's strengths. So I mentioned being in pharmaceutical sales, I'm a trainer now, I'm not selling, but I teach reps how to ask questions. So going to the appointment when I was there was an asset because I knew how to ask good questions. I knew how to navigate the hospital system, that kind of thing. Well, take those skills into account. So for example, if you have a niece who is a teenager and she's awesome at technology, as they all are, maybe you want to set up a meal train or a GoFundMe or something like that. Have the niece or nephew or the millennial do it because it's easy for them and they want to play a part and they feel like they're part of this support team. So they don't necessarily have to do some of the heavy lifting. Like if it's a sick parent and the teenager wants to be involved, that's a great way to get them involved. And they feel like they're playing a part. And they are playing a part. It's an important part. So just figure out how people can get involved. If you don't have a big family, that's where it gets more challenging, but there are definitely options. So think outside the box. I always say do a mind map because I was an English major and I love mind maps. If you don't know what that is, just Google it and you'll see 5,000 examples of mind maps. But the idea is to come up with, it's a brain dump. You just brainstorm on a piece of paper and start to think of how you can incorporate different people. So for me and my sister, it was easy because we had family and friends. But if you are living somewhere where you don't have that support, you need to start tapping into different people. For example, nonprofits. I'm a part of nonprofits and because of my sister and my dad's illness. So I have a passion for people that have that illness. And so the people that are part of those nonprofits are the same. They all have probably had experience themselves or a loved one. See if you can get support there. Think of local schools, high schools, colleges. They have sororities, fraternities, people that want to get volunteer hours. Can they come in and help in some way? Now, you want to vet people, strangers coming into your house, right?
Right.
So be aware of that. But maybe they don't even need to come in the house. What if you have a neighborhood boy who can take your trash out every Tuesday? It may seem minor, but it takes that off your plate and that decreases your stress.
Hey ladies, I need to interrupt for just a second to share about the Sisterhood membership. It's basically a sale every day, and the best part, it's free. Here's the details. We're partnering with our friends at Benefit Hub and other care partners to save you money. With over 200,000 participating companies across the U.S. and abroad, you'll find discounts at your favorite local stores, huge savings on vacations, amazing deals on home, auto, and supplemental insurances, and everything in between. Go to confessionsofareluctantcaregiver.com to sign up, and then definitely tell your friends about it. They can join too. Trust me, there's a discount for everyone. And don't forget, it's free. Okay, back to confessing.
So there are so many ways. Church, if you belong to a church, my sister had these older church ladies who are retired come and sit with her when we were at work and we couldn't keep up with the demand. They didn't need to do anything but sit there and hold her hand, or just they would knit while she slept. But that took a load off of our shoulders, So I think there's so many ways you can get people involved.
Well, and sometimes just being present with a person, there's nothing to say. It's just having company to not feel so completely alone. And I think that's the case for caregivers though too, because there are times when there are times when you want to be alone, and then when you are alone, the loneliness feels so heavy. You're like, oh, I need to go do something. And so I think whether it's with the person that you're caring for, because you're right, I love the more details into a support team, because you're right about there's a lot of folks who are going to be solo agers. And so I think about myself and my husband, we don't have children, we will be solo agers. And so we're just trying to find as many young people, friends with children that we can maybe bribe them with wills and so forth. But really, we're like, okay, who will take care of us when we're older? And so we have to plan for that now. How will we advocate for ourselves as we get older? And so I think, the strategies that you're talking about are non-traditional strategies that when you say them out loud, people are like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
I didn't think
Church.
about that.
I didn't think about schools though. I didn't think about the nonprofit necessarily. And I will say this, just so that folks have the resource, 211 is the non-emergency national number for to reach human services. So if you have needs from a human service standpoint, you can dial 211 and you can find a nonprofit, and it's related to anything, but it's the non-emergency number to reach human service professionals. So there's your PSA for today as well.
I love that. I love that.
So, yeah. And so I think, that's so exciting. Okay. So, I think Erin's given us so much good
I know.
stuff.
So, and in your book, in all of your training and everything, I know there are a lot of great steps that you teach people. And so I want to make sure I'm like, there's a whole training session that we could do for Erin.
I know. Let me think of one. Something that I talk about is asking good questions. We can talk about that. So this is something that I think is hard for, like I said, for some people. So I talked about organizing your questions, from most important to least important. The next step I would say is when you're analyzing those questions, one sales technique is to look at open questions versus closed questions. So a closed question starts with do, is, are, can, and it elicits a yes, no answer. Now, if you're chatty, like the three of us, you may talk more, but the average human will probably just answer with a yes or no. And a lot of doctors, the way that their minds work, they are very, analytical, and they will take your question literally the way it is, not all of them, but some of them, and just give you yes, no answer. a good way to get them to talk more is to take those questions and turn them into open-ended questions.
Of course.
So open-ended questions are what, how, who, when, where. So I give this example. We had my mother-in-law living with us about a year ago. And so I was able to use my own strategies after my sister passed, which was kind of cool because, I didn't write the book till after she passed away. And some of the strategies got better because I was able to sit and reflect, right? So I was like, oh, okay, this is even a better way. I'm just going to give people advice of a better way to do this than we did it. Hopefully you can be a better badass advocate than I ever was. So that's the goal. And so with my mother-in-law, my husband and his siblings, we had a text message group, came up with a list of questions. We did that whole thing. And then we'd switch them. So instead of saying, can she go for a walk today? Or can she walk? Because she had heart surgery. You could say, what kind of exercise is best for her? So a big difference. I have locked that doctor into walking. I have made the decision unintentionally that walking is what's best for my mother-in-law. That might not be the case. If I say, what exercise is best for her, he may list a whole thing of options. Now that is powerful knowledge. Now I know that I can make a workout routine for her. On Mondays, we're going to go for a 10-minute walk. On Tuesdays, you're going to use the stationary bike, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So if you can switch those questions, it won't always work. Sometimes you need to ask a closed-ended question. They're not bad questions. Sometimes you use them for clarifying, and that's fine, or confirming what you heard. But switch them when you can for a doctor's meeting or appointment.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's fantastic advice. And I'm going to tell you, I know that your book has even more juicy nuggets in it. So we're going to make sure that the link is in the show notes to make sure people have access to it and can get it. But what we didn't mention to Erin before we started is what time it is, Jay.
That's true.
Do you know what time it is, Jay?
Yes.
It is time for sister questions.
Yeah, my sister question's a little serious though. So I'm going to ask my sister question because it's a personal question.
Oh,
but here it is.
I like this.
So knowing how I felt over the years and then knowing kind of into the future how I would feel if something happened to my sisters, there's a part of me that kind of knows there would be anger. Like I would be angry. So have you dealt, because I know there are a lot of people we talk to that's one of their first emotions is, why did this happen to me? Do you have any anger about that? How did you has that ever been an issue for you?
Yes. It is not anymore, I'm happy to say, but yes. So my sister died in 2018 and I got off social media for a while. When she was sick, I got off because I was angry then. Maybe not angry when she was sick, anxiety. And then also really hard, I'm friends with some sisters on social media, people that I know personally who I love, but seeing their trips together or talking about how wonderful their sister is, that was really hard for me. And then when Megan died, yes, I was angry. I was angry that now not only had I lost my father, but I lost my sister. My family of 5 is now 3. When you lose your sibling, something that I learned, it changes your way in the world, which is not something I expected because I was always the baby sister. I always had an older sister. I still do, but she's not there. So she kind of led the way a lot. Even as an adult, I didn't even realize she did. But then all of a sudden she's gone and I'm like, well, wait, where's my compass? And I would cry to my best friend and say, but my compass is gone. I don't know how to find my way in the world. And so, yes, I was angry that other families have all of and that's terrible, but this is true. This is raw and true. I felt like other families have no loss. Their parents are old. They get to see their grandchildren. They have all their siblings. Their parents, have met their spouses. They were there for weddings. My sister only knew my son till he was 2. All of us 3 kids didn't have kids till we were older in life. So we missed that whole thing of she doesn't know him now. And there's a lot of anger. I'm angry for her girls. I think that's the hardest thing that I deal with now is really her daughters. I feel worse for them. So my sister, I don't think I mentioned that, had 2 young girls at the time. Now they're teenagers. When you need mom the most, right, is when you're a teenager and going through all the emotions and hormones and girl stuff that you go through. And so I'm sad for them more than I am for myself at this point. So it's taken a lot of healing. Writing the book, yes, helped because I'm so grateful I wrote it when I did. I started writing a few months after Megan passed away. I wouldn't remember probably half of what I wrote in that book if I had let time pass.
Yeah.
And so that was part of the healing. And then I did go to grief counseling, which I'd never done that in a group. And I would say that was wonderful, different experience. I'd always done one-on-one therapy, but just to hear other people and be able to relate to other people's grief and that I wasn't alone in that. That was amazing. And so all of this, and then I have some wonderful girlfriends. And my one best friend, even now, if I have a day where I get sad and I'll still say, I can't believe that Megan's gone. I still can't believe that my sister's gone.
Yeah.
So kind of like Natalie, you're talking about being away and when your dad was sick and when he passed away, you're kind of in denial. I went through that too, because my sister lived so far away. And now we had talked every day up until when she really got sick, and talking was exhausting to her. So there was a long period of time, probably like a year, where I felt like she was still alive and I just couldn't talk to her.
Yeah.
And then it would hit me like an hour into the day. And then I would get sick to my stomach and have anxiety and all that. So I have thankfully gotten past that, but I do like to share it because people will go through it. And I have a lot of empathy for when people lose a loved one because it's so painful.
Yeah.
And I almost had what's that called? An empath. Like I get sucked into news and all that.
Yeah.
Yes.
I get sucked into these things and I get really sad. My husband's like, you've got to stop watching the news. You get too involved in your mind, because I have felt that pain that people go through. And this was my person,
But it's okay. And I think that's so important for people to understand because so many people have guilt about it, but it is okay to have those feelings of, wow, why did this you got to work through it, but why is my dad passed and he was so young? Same situation with us. Why does my mom have Parkinson's? I'm losing part of her life. And so I think people really, that's a confession in itself that it's okay. It's not that it's okay, even it's normal. And
it's
normal. You have to have to
normalize
that. It's just part of it.
It's part of the grieving process. And it is okay that you feel that. And I do want to say to anyone who's maybe going through that or is, about to go through that, you will get through it. It'll get better, but you also have to do the work. It's just not going to happen to get better. You can be angry your whole life. I didn't want to be angry my whole life. My father, my sister would not want that for me. My husband and my children, I don't want to be angry for them and be sad or whatever. So I had to, and I want to live a happy life. And so now going back to the gratitude, I think about how I am so thankful that she was my sister. Absolutely. And even though I was robbed of 50 years with her, because I thought we'd be old ladies together, I am thankful that I was able just to call her my sister and my best friend. Absolutely. Like I'm so grateful for that because some people have crappy siblings, let's be honest, and
that's the truth.
I didn't have that. I was really lucky. And same with my father. Some people have really crappy parents and I was born to a wonderful family and you don't have control over that. So even though it still sucks and I will be sad some days, I feel genuinely happy and grateful. And it's the gratitude.
I love that. I love that.
I think the gratitude piece is so important to healing.
Yeah.
So here is the last question. It's
Natalie's favorite. Get ready.
I'm selfish. I'm the middle child. What is your favorite guilty pleasure? This is your guilty confession. Your favorite guilty pleasure.
Oh my gosh. My favorite guilty pleasure. Maybe I have too many.
Oh, that's okay. What's the one that you won't share with anybody in the sense of, I don't want, like, this is my guilty pleasure and I'm going to do it and I'm not even going to share it with anybody. Like in the sense of, I won't do it with you.
This is a hard question. What are yours? Maybe you'll make me think of something.
Mine are Little Debbie oatmeal cookies.
I'm going to tell you right now, mine, and needs to be a sponsor. Mine is Jason to go out and have guys' night and the dogs and I sit on the couch and we watch Hallmark movies on Friday night. That is just gravy. And he'll call me at 9:00. He's like, I'm on my way home. And I'm like, it's on till 10. Do you want to stay longer?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
It can be anything. It can be embarrassing. That's okay, Erin.
I love
we
that.
Don't care.
Okay, so mine's similar. I have one that's similar to yours, Natalie, but I want to go different because I don't want to copy off of you. So I would say one of my guilty pleasures, I don't do this all the time, is just dance in the house by myself.
I
love that. Yes.
And belt it out like I think I'm Mariah Carey, and I am not. Do not have a good voice, but I love to dance. Yep. And I can move my booty. Anyone who knows me, I got some rhythm. But yeah, I will go crazy in my house. And I think my 6-year-old's kind of taken after me. He will just all of a sudden start dancing. And so that's a guilty pleasure. And it brings me, actually, speaking about happiness, it brings me so much joy to like just dance and listen to some happy music and sing.
It feels good to your nervous system.
My only question, are you a kitchen dancer? I guess that's the thing, because I dance in the kitchen. Okay.
Yes, all of it. Bathroom. You know what? I belt it out in the car like nobody's business. I'm sure other people have heard me do that.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to tell you, I do. I love to sing in the car. And I always like to pretend like I am on an episode of The Voice. I just make it my own. And I could easily be on The Voice. I would not get a 4-chair turn.
Yeah. Oh, me either. No,
I'm not getting a 4-chair turn.
No. Well, Erin's next career, we all know, is going to be a famous singer. She'll be doing duets in Las Vegas with Mariah Carey and Celine Dion.
Oh,
and Adele. I'm going to be their backup dancer.
On our next show, Erin, you will be singing. So we cannot tell you how much we have enjoyed having you this morning.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. This is so much fun. Thank you for having me. I love talking to sisters. It's great. Sisters are the best.
Well, honorary sister. We have so many honorary sisters at this point. We're just like, you're part of the family. You're wrong. You should be a part of our family.
Just you wait. I'll come over and dance at your parties, Thanksgiving,
fantastic,
whatever.
We welcome it. So guys, thanks so much for listening in. Until the next time, the next confession that you hear. Thanks so much for being with us. Thanks. Well, friends, that's a wrap on this week's confession. Again, thank you so much for listening. But before you go, please take a moment to leave us a review and tell your friends about the Confessions podcast. Don't forget to visit our website to sign up for our newsletter. You'll also find the video recording of all of our episodes on the Confessions website and our YouTube channel. Don't worry, all the details are included in the show notes below. We'll see you next Tuesday when we come together to confess again. Till then, take care of you. Okay, let's talk disclaimers. You may be surprised to find out, but we are not medical professionals and are not providing any medical advice. If you have any medical questions, we recommend that you talk with a medical professional of your choice. As always, my sisters and I at Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver have taken care in selecting the speakers, but the opinions of our speakers are theirs alone. The views and opinions stated in this podcast are solely those of the contributors and not necessarily those of our distributors or hosting company. This podcast is copyrighted and no part can be reproduced without the expressed written consent of the Sisterhood of Care, LLC.